All right, kiddos. Welcome to week 2 of school being closed. I hope everybody is doing well. I hope everybody found uh, the section on soils to be thought provoking and all that good fun stuff. I know for most of you it should be review, but um, good review nonetheless. So, week 2 involves landscape design. It is chapter 2 out of the landscape portion of the Ohio Certified Nursery Technician book. It is also things that most of you should be or have learned already. Um, Juniors, we are in the midst of landscape design, so I know many of you, we've worked on some different drafting. We've talked about briefly the design principles, and one of the big things that we have talked about or we need to talk about is going through kind of the steps of the design process and dealing with customers. I know that this isn't ideal, but this is some of the stuff, again, that is on the test. So that's what I want to go over. So, without further ado, make sure that you guys are paying attention to this. Read the provided reading. This week's chapter is pretty small, and obviously, let's do the assessment that I send out. It's part of your weekly grade. On top of this, hopefully, I'll be sending out some things later in the week on the hands-on portion. I'm hoping that you guys are finding these to be at least somewhat thought-provoking and get you out of the house a little bit. So take advantage of it. Pay attention to this, as it will obviously be part of your second portion grade for the week. So, all right, kiddos, here we go.
Welcome to Chapter 2 of the Ohio Certified Nursery Technician Training Manual, developed by the Ohio Nursery and Landscape Association. In this chapter, we will learn about landscape design basics. Good landscaping begins with good design. Landscape design is a process that will impact you, whether you are a designer, a builder, or a manager. The definition of process is a series of steps, actions, or operations used to make something or cause a desired effect. It can also be defined as a sequence of problem-solving steps. Solving landscape problems is one of the main reasons people hire landscape designers. The first step in the landscape design process is to identify the client's desires and evaluate potential problems within the client's property. That information is then put into a series of statements called the design program. A design program can be considered as a list of landscape problems that require a design solution. The remainder of the design process falls into two categories: research and design. The type of research that goes into a landscape design eventually results in a base map, analysis, and inventory of the site. At certain points in the process, the designer needs feedback from the client to make sure the design challenges have desirable solutions. Once the client approves the design program, the final product of the landscape design process is the master plan. The design process is not the same for every designer. However, every good designer develops a process to follow each time they begin a new design project. Developing a design process is important for organizing information from the client and from the site analysis, and it helps you discover design solutions. When you have an orderly approach to the design, the logical solution can be found quickly. The design process enables the designer to effectively communicate design ideas with the client and explain the results of the design solutions. This way, both the designer and the client understand each other better, which leads to cooperation and client satisfaction. No matter how a designer follows the design process, the steps will fall into two main areas. The first step is design preparation and research, which is when a designer gathers information from the client and the site. The gathering of information can include interviewing the clients and outlining his or her landscape needs. Another aspect of the design preparation involves creating a base map that lays out the general features of the landscape site. This is the step where any possible design restrictions are identified and listed. The next step in the landscape design process is design assembly. At this point, the designer takes the information compiled about the site and the client and develops a design. Within this initial layout, the site restrictions and their possible solutions are laid out within a preliminary design sketch, which eventually becomes the master plan. Design preparation and research begins by meeting and interviewing the client about their expectations, design personality, and functional requirements for the landscape. As the designer identifies the client's needs, any unique site challenges and possible solutions should be discussed. During the client meeting, the designer should describe his or her design philosophy and style to ensure that the designer and the client are in agreement. And at this time, since the designer also operates as salesperson for the company, he or she will present all the services available to the client. Once questions have been asked and answered and common ground found regarding the design concepts, the final portion of the interview is dedicated to developing a budget. One of the main purposes of the client interview is to formulate a design program. The design program can be as simple as a list of features to include in the landscape, or a more detailed description of what the designer wants to address. After the meeting with the client and creating a design program, the designer will turn their attention to the site. It is best to complete the evaluation of the site without the client present, to prevent distracting input or judgments. To create a base map, the designer needs to first sketch the property, including all existing elements of the area, including patios or decks. Special consideration must be made for the topography, condition of existing plants and other features, and complete measurements. The measurements of the site should be depicted properly in the base map, using a scale drawing. The base map is a template or canvas on which the rest of the design takes place. It is drawn using a measurement scale, and in this case, the scale is that every 1 inch of the base map equals 20 feet in the property. The base map lays out the boundaries of the property, the location of the house, the floor plan of the house's ground floor, the driveway, and any sidewalks. To analyze possible issues or conditions in the site, the designer must take a critical look at all aspects of the property. Some of this analysis may require taking soil samples, identifying existing plants, and determining where the sun rises and sets throughout the year. To avoid damage to the site's infrastructure, a design must record where utility lines and pipes are located. To create an aesthetically pleasing plan, various viewpoints of the property should be identified to ensure that the best features can be seen by the client or the neighborhood. After the survey of the property, the designer then takes the gathered information and uses the base map to create a graph representation called the inventory and analysis. This is a valuable step in the design process because designers are able to familiarize themselves with every aspect of the site. Ultimately, a close knowledge of the property helps the designer formulate solutions to site issues as well as creative designs. From the inventory and analysis, the designer then sketches solutions or ideas to meet both the client's needs and the topography of the property. These rough sketches, which use arrows and basic shapes to lay out spaces, are called functional diagrams. Each functional diagram can present options for the client in how to meet the objectives of the design program. During the functional diagram phase of the process, the designer also conceptualizes form studies in order to come up with a design theme. Some form themes include formal, diagonal, arc, and tangent or curvilinear. For instance, arc and tangent designs are less formal, with series of straight lines connecting to arcs, which promote gathering areas. Curvilinear design use only curved edges in the landscape and reflect natural, informal movement. Before committing to any one style or diagram, the designer meets with the client to determine what they like or dislike about any of the diagrams. After determining what style and layout the client likes, the designer then creates a preliminary design. The preliminary design converts the general shapes of the functional diagram into exact shapes and defined spaces. Patterns develop, which may suggest hardscape materials and plant materials ideas can also emerge. However, the designer may want to label the diagram with generalities, like shade trees or ornamental trees, until the client makes the final approval of material. During this meeting, the designer and client will determine hardscape materials and final plant selections. The amount of involvement in material selection will vary based on the client. After the final meeting with the client, the designer makes any requested changes and adds details for hardscape and plant selections. The master plan is the final product of the client interview, the site analysis, and your design ideas. This plan is also used to produce the construction details used during installation. While designing a landscape, the designer should consider landscape's construction, establishment, and care. The materials a designer selects and the care they require determine the success of a landscape after installation. Maintenance requirements and how a client plans on caring for the landscape must be factored into the design discussion early in the process. No one is more critical of a design than the designer, and it is important to evaluate your finished products. After the design is installed, revisit the site periodically to see if the solutions and design elements were successful. Revisiting the property also allows the designer to analyze if the chosen plant combinations remain aesthetically pleasing. Because a landscape is always changing, keeping in touch with the clients is professional business practice and helps forge long-time clients. In summary, the design process is a useful tool that allows designers to organize information and ideas. Not every situation requires the entire process. Some clients don't request material approval, and others may not have any landscape issues to work around. The process is just a guide to help designers develop aesthetic and functional solutions to the design challenges or clients' needs that they encounter. Moving from the merits of the design process, the question remains, what design elements are worth a client's time and money? Creating an outdoor room is a design concept that guides many landscape designers. Outdoor rooms bring function into a landscape and provide purpose and defined space for the client to use and enjoy. As the outdoor room concept takes shape, you'll notice that many elements are similar to those of interior designers. Outdoor rooms and space need walls, sometimes to separate areas for design interest, and other times to create screened areas for additional privacy. Walls in an outdoor room can take literal shapes, like trellises and fences, or they can be defined more loosely, like an area planted densely to separate two spaces despite limited area. Sometimes a designer wants to create a physical separation in the landscape, but the space is not wide enough for large screening plants. In these cases, a fence is the best choice since that can create a sense of privacy. Fences can also act as a background for smaller plants and a barrier to better define the outdoor space. Be sure to check local zoning codes that may restrict the height, length, or material makeup of fences in your client's community. The floor of an outdoor room can be any type of material such as pavers, stepping stones, grass, or turf, and wooden patios or decks. The concept of a window in an outdoor area is not specifically designed for allowing in light. Rather, windows in the outdoor room focus on views and seek to heighten curiosity for the landscape beyond. The ceiling is probably the hardest aspect of the outdoor room to identify. In many cases, the sky is the ceiling. However, if the client or design calls for a more intimate feel, then a tree or arbor-like structure can be used to close in the space. The transition between landscape rooms is equivalent to a hallway in a house. The passageway bordered by plants is probably the simplest form of landscape transition. A change of flooring material can create a sense of arrival into a new room. The more dramatic the transition, such as a change of grade, stone pillars, or a heavy gate, the more impressive the sense of arrival will be. One of the reasons people hire landscape designers is that they want their landscapes to feel like a resort. A landscape designer creates this atmosphere by using existing landscape views and creating new ones. Views into and from an outdoor room are important in the enjoyment of your design and your client's satisfaction. Some tips in creating outdoor rooms in the landscape include the following. Make sure the rooms are large enough to serve the function you desire. Whenever possible, use local materials in construction to encourage sustainability. The form of the room should fit the theme that your concept studies and client meetings have defined. To add detail to good design, consider the views into the room from other parts of the landscape. In summary, outdoor living areas must be functional and aesthetic. The most successful outdoor rooms are an extension of similar rooms within the house. The secret to their success lies in the transition from the house to the landscape, how comfortable the space feels, and design elements that make them interesting. An understanding of the design process and working with client needs, in addition to these outdoor room concepts, are crucial to your landscape success. This concludes Chapter 2, Landscape Design.
All right, kiddos. There you have it. Oh, let's flip around here. Hold on, let's see if I can figure this out. I don't know how. Crap. Hey, kiddos. Well, that's Chapter 2. Hope everybody's doing well. If only half my head's here, well, too bad. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope everybody's doing well. And we'll hopefully see you soon. All right. See you guys.